Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar series. This is the first in a series of 4 webinars hosted by the AGU Hydrology Section Student Subcommittee in this annual webinar series, Navigating Academic Waters. Before I hand things off to our speakers for today, I want to give a brief overview of Quasi while folks are logging on and getting settled. My name is Julia Masterman. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a training coordinator for Quasi. Quasi is a consortium of universities for the advancement of hydrologic science. We're a nonprofit funded in part by the National Science Foundation, and our mission is to empower the water community and advance science through collaboration, infrastructure, and education. Quasi sustains infrastructure to enable research and collaboration, in part by providing a data repository for water science data called HydroShare. By providing this support and infrastructure, Quasi can help researchers formulate and execute their data management plans, be effective data stewards, and meet the requirements of funding and publishing. Quasi also provides educational opportunities and infrastructure for student support. These include workshops, a summer institute for graduate students, webinar series and events like this one, a virtual university, and more. Both our data infrastructure and educational opportunities are designed to enable collaboration and interdisciplinary work. There are a few upcoming deadlines I want to point you towards. Firstly, applications are open for the Snow Measurement Field School. This program is presented by Center and Quasi with support from NASA. And applications are open now. Review will begin September 15th. And we hope that you will apply and join us. This is a program that's been hosted annually for the past over 7 years, I believe. And we're looking forward to another great snow school in Colorado this year. We'll be hosting another webinar alongside the Cleveland Water Alliance and the Water Environmental Federation, or WEF, in just a few short weeks on September 10th. This will be a panel where we explore efforts to measure, assess impact, and address emerging contaminants such as microplastics, and we'll hope you'll join us then. We have another webinar series going on, starting at the end of September with USGS on the National Water Availability Assessment. This will be a webinar happening once a month, September through November, on different aspects of this assessment. We hope that you'll connect with us. You can join our mailing list and follow us on Blue Sky and LinkedIn. You can also see our YouTube channel where we have previous webinars and where this webinar will be posted later today. I'll put links in the chat to point you towards these resources in just a moment. This webinar today is part of a 4-part series. We'll hope you will join us for the remainder of the webinars in the series. Quick note that the remaining webinars will begin at 1 p.m., so an hour later than this one. And with that, today's webinar is on reframing research language for impactful and relevant broader impact statements. A huge thank you to our speakers for taking the time to join us today. We have a wonderful panel to share their expertise, and also a major kudos to our hosts at AGU H3S for convening such a fantastic panel. Before I hand things off, a few logistics. Firstly, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Quasi YouTube channel. Secondly, we ask that you use the Q&A functionalities to submit questions to our speakers. Please feel free to add questions at any time and upvote any that are especially of interest to you. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible. Finally, we expect that all involved with Quasi Cyber seminars uphold the Quasi Code of Conduct and promote and maintain a professional, considerate, and respectful virtual environment. So thank you for being a part of that. And now I will pass the mic on to Mazvita to give a brief overview of AGU-H3S and to introduce our speakers today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Julia, and thank you for everyone for attending. You may not be able to see the other attendees, but right now we have over 130 people on line, which is very good. So I'm Mazvita. I'm a member of AGU H3S, which is the Hydrology section, Student and Early Career Subcommittee. And this is a group made up of motivated students and early career hydrologists who work to create opportunities for other students and early career hydrologists through professional development, social interactions, and to create networking opportunities with the broader geoscience community. If you want to find out more information about us, you can find us at aguh3s.org. And our subcommittee is made up of further subcommittees ranging from professional development, outreach, conferences, and today you get to hear from the JEDI subcommittee, which is the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion subcommittee. And you can also find us at AGU and at the exhibition hall in booth A36 with Quasi as well. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. And then introducing our facilitators. So I will be one of the facilitators. My name is Majita. I'm a PhD student from Rutgers, and we'll also be joined by Kelly Garvey and Caitlin Mayernik. They're also both HCS Jedi members, and you get to hear from them a little bit later in the discussion and Q&A. Thank you. And with that being said, I'll introduce today's webinar, which is titled Reframing Research Language for Impactful and Relevant Broader Impact Statements. And we think this is a particularly important topic right now and will be important as we navigate various career stages because scientific and political climates at times may shift. And the type of science that's funded during those periods may also shift. So, as scientists, we want our work to not only make scientific advancements, but for us to also do science that's impactful and meaningful. And a big part of that is communicating our science in a way that makes it clear why it matters and ensuring that it gets funded so we can continue doing this impactful work. So, to help guide this discussion, we've invited a group of panelists who bring diverse perspectives and experience. They'll share insights from reviewing successful grants, writing proposals in both academia and at a federal level, and from an organizational level where funding decisions influence the type of programs that different organizations can hold. Through their various experiences, we'll explore what makes successful broader impact statements and how to navigate changes in the funding landscape. So, with that, I'm excited to introduce our panelists. We have Billy Williams, the Executive Vice President of Ethics and Organizational Advancements at the American Geophysical Union. We have Kelly Caylor, the Associate Vice Chancellor for Research in Earth, Environmental, and Sustainability Sciences, and a professor in the Department of Geography at the University of California, Santa Barbara. We have Heather Golden, a research scientist at the Environmental Protection Agency, and Laura Lautz, a program director in the Water, Landscape, and Critical Zone Processes of the National Science Foundation. With that, I'll hand it over to Caitlin, who will lead our guided discussion, and you'll get to hear from Kelly a little later in the Q&A. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this webinar.
Thank you, Majita, for that great introduction. I think you really set us up well to start off and with our first question of what makes a broader impact statement successful. And when evaluating or writing impactful broader impact statements, what do you look for or aim to achieve? And I think for this one, we might start with Laura, if that's all right.
Sure, of course. Well, hi everyone out there. Thanks for this great introduction from our hosts. I'm really happy to be here. It's always great to have an opportunity to interact with the community, even if through just the Q&A box. Can't see all the faces out there. Really excited to have the chance to interact. And so I'm happy to answer this first question about broader impact statements and what makes them successful. And I guess I would, lean on some of the words, of course, in the phrase broader impacts. Like the key word is impact, right? And the potential to benefit society. This is how we frame broader impacts at the National Science Foundation. And by benefiting society, we mean contributing to specific desired societal outcomes. And specificity, I think, is really important in broader impact statements. And I wanted to just note briefly that broader impacts can cover a wide range of activities. And so there are lots of things that can be presented in broader impact statements that contribute to these desired societal outcomes. So for example, broader impact activities can really focus on improving STEM education, and that can be at all levels. It could be K through 12, it could be at the undergraduate level, the graduate level, it could be technical training, which I think a lot of folks think about when they think about broader impact statements. It can be activities that improve STEM literacy for the general public. So we can think of like education and public outreach type of activities. Improving the STEM workforce, so activities that help train a globally competitive workforce in trainees at all levels. And then also any activity that overall improves the well-being of individuals and society. So this could be things like in the hydrologic sciences, improving preparation for geohazards like flooding, improve water security, water quality, improve crop production and food security, public health, all these kind of outcomes that benefit society. And also developing partnerships between academia and industry partners, private sector partners, government partners. And so there's a broad range of things that can be in broader impact statements. But that being said, not all of these things will appear in every broader impact statement. And I actually think trying to cover too many things can really hinder success. So I would say in order to, when I'm evaluating a broader impact statement and thinking about what makes it most competitive or most impactful, it's helpful to be really specific in which kind of activities or what kind of impact you hope to have through the activities that you propose. So even though, there can be lots of things in those statements, specificity of what you want to do and what impact that you want to have is really important. And then what you will actually do to make sure that that benefit that you hope to have for society is actually realized. So things like being able to note that you have actual collaborative partnerships with the stakeholders you aim to work with. Demonstrating you have those relationships can be a way of demonstrating that you can actually realize the impacts that you want to have. Maybe allocating budget for those activities. We look for letters of collaboration to indicate that people have those relationships. And then I also look for how people will measure success and what will success look like. So if you propose to improve STEM education, you want to improve K through 12 education, have you thought about how you might assess the learning outcomes for students? If you're doing public outreach, how might you document participation in those activities? Or if you're aiming to improve society, how might you document adoption of the concepts that you've developed by decision makers and policymakers? So specificity, and then also how you measure success are all ways that you can make your broader impact statements more competitive. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I am curious on the other end of the folks on the call that are writing a lot of grants, what their perspective and experience has been for successful broader impact statements. So if somebody.
Oh, go ahead, Billy.
No, you, Steve, Kelly.
Also eager. It's obviously, yeah, just before I jump in, I just also want to second Laura's, gratefulness for you all organizing this. It's a really great topic of discussion and obviously really important right now. And I guess like when I'm thinking about putting together broader impacts, there's kind of I think of it as a kind of three things I'm trying to do, like develop something that's credible. Like, does this look like something I can accomplish? And then, to Laura's point, something that's measurable, like do I have any sense of like how I'm going to get this done on the back end? Can I measure what's happened? And then I think increasingly, looking at things that are durable, like when this is over, like what remains, right? In terms of like, will there be some sustained activity? And so I think, when you think about that, you're really trying to figure out, okay, well, what can I accomplish? Like, who can I partner with to kind of get something done? Maybe, my research is cutting edge and I'm inventing everything in my own lab, but my broader impacts actually can leverage like the community and all the things that are already going on, organizations, societies, institutions, even in my own campus that are already doing things that I can connect to. And that really helps the credibility thing. We're scientists, we're curious, we're always trying to experiment with new things, but sometimes there's like well-worn paths that we can go down to have like measurable and impactful broader impacts. And we should take those. And then on the measurement side, sometimes I'm even working backwards. Like, what do I, if I want to like work with X number of farmers or like have like some interaction with some number of students, like what does that mean about how I set up my program, right? So you don't want to always be 100% metrics focused, but if you're not thinking about like how you would measure something, then it's really hard to design it, right? And so sometimes that kind of backflow from like what I want to measure can be really helpful for planning what I want to do. And that's a place where like really it's good to have partners who can help you think about how to do assessment or how you might characterize things. We're not, I work with a lot of people who do human subjects research, but it's not my priority. It's not my number one thing. And I'm certainly not an educator in the way that like people who are trained in K through 12 education are. So partnerships help you figure that out as well. And then on the durability thing, yeah, I go back to like, who am I working with? Like, are these institutions that can persist beyond the end of my grant? And are they enthusiastic about the things we're developing so that they can be sustained? So I think a lot of this is just kind of really, building those collaborative partnerships for broader impacts, especially as an early career scientist, and leveraging the resources that are available at the institutions that you're part of. I'll leave it there.
If I could just build on that. So first of all, thank you again for sponsoring this session. It's very important, especially in these times. But just to build on what Laura said and Kelly, I don't have a lot more to add because the perspective I'm bringing is not so much from someone who's on the evaluation end, such as Laura and her organization. I have evaluated proposals. But one of the things I have been involved actively in submitting proposals and writing proposals, some successful, some not. And my takeaway from that is twofold. And I think it might be obvious to you, but I don't think it hurts to restate this. To make sure that what you are proposing clearly aligns with the objectives of the funding organization. So first, making sure you have that alignment before you're actually going forward. I would also recommend having some consultation with the program officer on the receiving end, if you can, in advance, just to understand exactly what they're looking for. That's always helpful. And some of you might be a little shy about reaching out or doing that. So maybe you do it in consultation with your advisor if needed, if you're still at that stage. But having those discussions, I think, are always helpful. But the thing I've learned, and my takeaway from all this, even that I learned from those grants that are denied, is be really clear about if this is funded, so what? What changes? What problems have you solved by doing this? So I think those are the two things that take away from me when I've had things and we just had one this past week that said, no, we're not going to fund you. It was more, we weren't strong enough we've described a lot of activities and some things that we thought would be important, but their question back to us was, oh, this is good. This is not bad stuff, but what really changes in the field? What problem have you clearly solved, or at least set up some pathway for solving that problem? So think about that as you think about your broadening impact statement. And also remember, broader impact is different from intellectual merit. You may have a lot of intellectual merit, but if you can't put that in terms of impact, then you're wasting people's times. Thank you.
And I don't know if you wanted to hear from everybody, but I'll step in as well. So I'm coming from the perspective of my research almost always has to have some kind of applied or broader impact, being in a federal agency. So a lot of times I am evaluating proposals, but I'm also a collaborator in proposals. So I can kind of go from both those perspectives too. Two things when thinking through the evaluation and the development of that broader impact statement is, will it pass the sniff test? And I think Laura, Billy, and Kelly all kind of address that. The sniff test kind of being, does it really sound tangible? Is it something, are you addressing something outside of academia that's important that can have a societal impact? And then two, is there a measurable way to demonstrate that impact through time? Now, I'm kind of repeating what everybody said. Well, that's very big picture. I know early in my career, it was hard to even grasp how do I start this? How would I even start this broader impact to make that, impact on society? And one of the things I was thinking, and we might get to this later, but just in case we don't, I wanted to put this up front. Think about even locally. One of the things, if you listen to your morning NPR, however long you can listen at this point to your NPR station, listen to the local side of the news. What things are being addressed? I learn every day new things. I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, new things going on in my community. I'm like, oh yes, what we're doing could totally apply to this. And then think about who you could reach out to that's working on that issue in the city realm or at a local soil and water conservation service. That's one thing you could really do, and just look locally so you're not as overwhelmed initially. And look at your local watershed groups, just online, things like that. And there's ways you could pass that sniff test and have that long-term impact. Is really like start there so you're not overwhelmed by the bigger, who am I even going to go to for this impact? So.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. I think that's a good transition into our next question, which was how you navigated changes and adapted to broader impact statement over your career stages, both with you personally growing as a researcher and also having to respond to changes in what Laura mentioned of responding to the funding goals, and Billy mentioned that as well. And when those shift in terms of when funding goals shift, and then you're also growing as a researcher, we are curious how you responded and adapted your broader impact statements.
I'll just hop in again real quick. The one thing I would recommend is going to, this is all US based right now, but just going to some of the federal agency websites and seeing what kind of their new directions are. For example, EPA we're working under 5 different pillars right now, and try to see how, like, if I were writing a proposal to EPA, how I could tuck into or bring to contribute to some of those pillars. So that is one way of thinking about it. And also, if there are any newer in the last few years, grand challenge documents from any of the agencies or just science in general, I know I just saw one from an Australian perspective. It was in a recent future directions and hydrological grand challenges, but that weaving in both those kind of grand challenges and going to the different USGS, EPA websites and kind of NASA, seeing what because they update those websites for new administrations. So seeing what those new priorities are is one way of doing it.
Yeah, and just to build on that, if I could add, as Heather was saying, because I know NSF just recently issued new letters calling for a lot of investment in AI learning and STEM education. Just so being aware of where the science is going would be important for you as well as you align your work in hydrology, whether it's in data science or machine learning, AI, all those things are important. And also being aware that in some cases you might be working on an activity that might have some implications for national security, for example. That's always a safe bet in the United States if it's real for you. So I'll just say make sure you stay aware of what the agency's priorities are as you go forward. Not so much around your career stage, but that's important at any career stage. For my career stage, my first 20 years out of college, I was working in industry. So I didn't have to worry about broader impact statements. I had to worry about getting this stuff done. I was in industry. You get stuff done and you get it done in a quality fashion. And so it was only after I transitioned from there and I worked for the National Academies first, and now I'm at the American Geophysical Union, that I have this interface with the academic community and fully understanding the needs and opportunities for broader impact statements and grant support and what that means for all of us. Thanks.
Yeah, I follow up just in terms of the career stage stuff, and I kind of alluded to this earlier. I think starting early in your career, you really want to start with like smaller scale, repeatable, credible things that you can accomplish. I think, it's not feasible to kind of be launching an entirely new research track and intellectual agenda, and at the same time be kind of reinventing an entire curriculum around your research topic area. So it's really important to kind of it's not that broader impacts are backseat to the intellectual merit in any project, but it's just that like people understand that you're just going to have more, like you have more resources to bring to bear on your intellectual merit. So when you have a big scope, I'm going to do all this work at a field site that's got tons of instrumentation, or at this long-term research station, et cetera, like you're already in a community, and the broader impacts, you're often kind of like having to find that community as you go. And so you need to, start with something that can be scoped. And then as you move to mid-career, maybe you're institutionalizing programs that you've developed over time. Maybe you're building these curricular data sets and tools that will outlast, your contributions. But I really do think like it's really want to be super authentic about what you can do and where you can place your best efforts. And that often is local, right? It is local partnerships in the community, where you can have a big impact. And I think there are sometimes some bit of a juggling match if you're doing, I did a lot of international work early in my career, and so it was hard to bring that like locally back, always to the schools that were in the community I was in, but like finding ways to bridge the science questions of like, well, those questions we're asking there, like how do they relate to what we're doing here? Even if it's not like 100% like, hey, Central New Jersey kids, we're going to learn about Savannah ecohydrology today, right? Like you have to kind of like balance that. But I do think like it's kind of a mistake if you're kind of looking at the end goal. It's like starting a scientific career trying to like, I'm going to write, 100 papers or something. No, you need to like write the one in front of you, and maybe, kind of build from there.
I was gonna let you go on to your next question, because I think
Okay,
some of
great.
the responses I had to those kind of lay into maybe what I think the next question might be.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you all for your answers so far. Our next question was, how do you understand the changes and adaptations required of scientists in today's political climate or landscape?
Since I said I thought this would tie into the last question, I'm happy to start. Anyway, I was thinking,
let's go. Thanks, Laura.
Sure. I hope that's okay. I was just thinking, because of my thinking about this question that you just asked, connected to what others were saying about tailoring your activities to agency priorities. And so I think I wanted to kind of pick up on that thread that, adapting broader impact statements to shifts in the political landscape. I mean, I think this can be really difficult when things change very quickly, but things do change, and they have changed. And I think this really gets into how you frame your work or tailor your activities to address those agency priorities. That's how I might think about it. And I think the thing is, the work that you all are doing, I'm sure, can address a number of wide-ranging priorities from a number of different potential investors in your research, whether those are federal agencies that may invest in your work, or the private sector, or not-for-profits. And so thinking about the work you do and how you can tailor it to speak to different priorities can be very helpful broadly for soliciting funding for your research, right? I mean, this is kind of, and so I think about this because we get this a lot at NSF when thinking about like applied versus basic research, which I think is maybe a more sort of benign example to talk about. But I think one could then some of the current changes in the political landscape. But one could be doing research on a topic that could be, the fundamental work you could be doing, those soil column experiments in your lab or the field data acquisition that you're doing, could be framed as meeting some very applied research goals that might be good for a more mission-driven funding agency like USDA. Maybe you're actually like targeting specific reductions in nutrient loading from the landscape, or you're targeting specific like crop productivity or something, where at NSF we're looking at more basic research. You might frame your research a little bit differently to speak to our priorities, even though some of the core work that you're doing may be very similar. It's just kind of how you frame it to to try to get that investment. So a lot of times we'll advise folks who are looking for funding from NSF, to start with their basic research question, like maybe what we don't really understand nitrogen mineralization rates, in soils. And so we really need to understand those microbial communities or that process. And ultimately that could be really useful in a managed landscape, right? But if you were going to a different agency, you might be like, well, in these managed landscapes, we have this fundamental problem, like estimating, I don't know, fertilizer application rates, or this is not my area, but you might have some really applied question, and you're like, well, we need to understand this fundamental process to improve that applied goal. And in the middle, you could be doing something very similar in terms of research, but it's just that the framing can be quite different. And so I think this is about kind of knowing your audience. And so when I think about like shifting priorities, sometimes the way you talk about the work you do, it is a bit of sales to go to the funder. And so how do you, kind of frame what you're doing in that context? But that doesn't mean that the work that you're doing can't also address other priorities that are maybe not emphasized for that particular funder because they're not meeting their specific priorities. Like if your work is really applied, you might not put that front and center to the National Science Foundation because you're really trying to emphasize its basic research application. So, you may have many parallel projects that are using some of the same core concepts and methods that meet multiple objectives, and that actually allow you to diversify your funding portfolio by going to different agencies or different funders, but like framing your work in terms of how you meet their priorities. And so I know there's a lot of shifting priorities, and I think Billy mentioned like NSF you can go to the NSF website and there's a link at the very top to read about NSF's new priorities. And so you can see those and then really think about how the work you're doing can meet those priorities. But I think that that's a better way to think about it than to think about how do I change what I'm doing, in response to priorities. It's better to, you have your core work, how can you take elements of it and really sell it to a particular funder in how it meets their priorities. But not everything you do has to meet everybody's priorities. You can kind of have a diverse portfolio.
Yeah, I would kind of think about the framing question. If you think about broader impacts, that word broader, we're really trying to do translational science and get people to understand the importance of some of the things that we're working on, or just the enthusiasm for the curiosity that we have for the topics that we're studying, and trying to kind of think about using language that is more value neutral, that is kind of, it allows more people into the conversation, is actually a positive. And so, I like to think about, I've done research long enough to have been through a lot of like tide changes with respect to research priorities and political situations. And, it's the things that are kind of consistent is thinking about issues about environmental resilience or health and safety, or like training and workforce development and efficiency and cost savings. Like there's things that like that really do have like broad universal interest and perspectives that we can use to frame the things we're doing. And I think that that's actually not something we should shy away from and be like, well, now we'll do this because nobody wants to hear, XYZ. I think it's something actually that we should be always thinking about in terms of like, how can we frame the things that we're doing in ways that like, kind of bring in the broadest group of people, which is often going to be people that we're not normally working with. And for a lot of us who work at universities, that's just anybody who's not on the university campus. Like literally, as soon as you go off campus, you're in a community that probably has a very different perspective about a lot of things than you do, and kind of embracing that as a way of developing your broader impacts actually will help you talk better in more general terms about the research you're doing in a lot of other contexts as well.
Those are super good points. And I also want to loop back to what Laura was saying, because I think it needs to be maybe said again, just so you all hear, because it's super important. You don't have to change what your core research is. You're changing the framing of it, right? So just remember that. And how do you do that? You can start from ground up. And Laura gave an example. And something I was thinking was like, okay, you study subsurface transport, right? So you can link that to constituents that go with the water flowing underneath the subsurface? And then how does that, that helps local managers with their water quality. Oh, and then we're building into a data set that you can synthesize regionally, just kind of build up, ground up, because you might start at this really small scale and be like, there's no way I can target that particular, that framing, but you can just think through it. And I think it takes time, because I think we could all say, all of the panelists here, like, it takes time to build that kind of process in your brain. But I think you can definitely do it and think about those grand challenges too. But it's the framing that's the key.
And I really don't have anything to add to those great answers already. Thank you.
Could I say one more thing then?
Absolutely, yes.
I just wanted, because the other thing I was thinking is it depends on the funding agency, but there might be more of a need. I heard Billy say about AI. That's definitely seems to be driving almost all the agencies right now, being like US being a leader in AI. Also, if there's a component of your research where you can develop, even if it's the smallest tool, a tool to look at management practices and see how they result in nitrate loadings, or something super small, but something tangible that you can prove that it's hands-on. I think that's going to be really important. Maybe not necessarily like Laura was saying it for NSF so much, but maybe like a USDA, an EPA, things like that. Just think of that little tool component, maybe a little bit more applied, and that might be helpful too.
Great, thank you so much. And I really appreciate the emphasis that kind of re-emphasizes our title for this, of reframing broader impact statements. And as an early career, I appreciate the explanation of how you're reframing your science, not reinventing yourself every time you apply for something. That's really great. So for the last few minutes of our general discussion, if any folks have any comments on this last question, which is, as research language and science communication become more accessible to broader audiences, how do you tailor your research language to connect with these different audiences, like your local community members, maybe local policymakers, educators, and those sorts of things, like basically trying to close the under our understanding as early careers on how you've done this, now that you've told us how important it is to do. And anybody can go ahead, Billy.
I'll start on that one, because
Great.
I think that gets to just the heart of the purpose of broader impact statements, but also just how we communicate science and what we're trying to achieve. And we need to be able to communicate what our objective is in what I'm going to call plain language, that someone with an 8th grade understanding could understand and comprehend, especially when you're communicating beyond just your academic community or academic environment. The broader impact statements are even, I would say, more critical as you start looking at other philanthropic funding agencies potentially for funding your work, because they're not as much interested in the intellectual merit as they are, okay, how are you solving this problem in this community or for this group of people? So, with that said, I think it's, again, it becomes important to know how to communicate in that plain language, whether you're in academia or outside of academia. That's very important.
Yeah, something that another hat I wear is editor-in-chief of Earth's Future, AGU journal. And this is a transdisciplinary journal, and people kind of like, what does transdisciplinary mean? We just figured out multidisciplinary, but the general idea is like thinking about kind of development of science with stakeholders, so kind of co-production of science. And this is actually super hard and very challenging to do. And if you look around for federal funding to do that, it's few and far between. But on the broader impacts, it is actually a really great model. So if you're trying to figure out how to do a better job of translating your research into communities, just like go into the communities and start talking with people about like, hey, like what would you like to have that's related to the kinds of things I do? And sometimes, sure, the answer is absolutely nothing. Please go away or whatever, but it's pretty rare. I mean, if you come in like to the communities that you think are going to be interested, but you don't know how to connect with them, you will find partners and you can build those things together. It definitely requires some legwork up front, right? It's that part of a proposal where like you're trying to get that figure one, which is just enough data to prove you might be able to get a cool result. Well, kind of run that play with your broader impacts, right? Just enough of a relationship that makes you think, well, we probably could do something if we had funding for a few years to really hammer this out. And I think that just kind of building stakeholders into the beginning of the broader impacts really is going to generate much better results than kind of like hoping maybe you got a letter from someone that says, yeah, if this is funded, we'll kind of listen to what you're saying, but you never even met this person and you're not really sure what you're going to give them. So just like embrace that kind of co-production, and I think it can really help. And maybe it'll get to your science too, which would be amazing, but you can definitely do it in terms of how you engage with the communities.
Something else, just very quickly, is what I've done in the past is think about a friend or a family member who is completely outside of your realm or your discipline or academia or whatever, and just run things by them like, okay, I'm going to tell you in a minute what this is all about. Does this make sense? Okay, if I say it this way, does it make sense? And just kind of feel it out that way, because we use jargon all the time that like we think is just normal, and it isn't. In the outside of our communities, right? So research communities. So that's a way to do it too. Just bounce it off people who don't know anything about it.
That's so great. Okay, I think it's time to move to the audience question and answer. And so I appreciate all of your responses, and I'm gonna pass the mic to Kelly to moderate that. Kelly Garvey to moderate that. You've done enough, Kelly Caylor.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caitlin, and thank you so much to all our panelists. This has been an awesome discussion. So the first question is from Amanda. Can Laura and others comment on how often career stage is actually considered when evaluating the level of broader impacts proposed? Sometimes it feels like at an early career stage, our budding collaborators may read less impactful than well-established collaborators. I always wonder how that actually plays out in proposal competitiveness. Thanks.
Well, I'm happy to take a first stab at this since the person asking the question mentioned me. This is a great question. And I think even more than career stage, broader impacts can scale with the scope of the project. And I do think, if you're proposing, a multi-institution, 5-year, $20 million project versus, a 3-year single investigator, a few $100,000 award, sometimes the expectations for the nature and type of impact can scale, with that level of investment. So I think for someone who is in early career stage, like maybe writing their first at NSF, first NSF proposal, you're probably more going for a smaller scale project than leading like a multi-institution, like highly complicated project. And so there is, I think, reviewers understanding that the nature of the broader impact activities and the extent of the impact does scale with the size and type of project. And so I think you can feel confident that reviewers are thinking in that way. And I guess I would also say, just in terms of thinking about how to get started with the kind of broader impact activities you could propose, I guess I'm picking up on something Kelly mentioned earlier, which is like to be authentic and to also use the resources available. And the resources available can help you like scale up your impact, even though you may be an early career investigator and have limited experience in some of these activities. As a new investigator, you can lean on there's a lot of institutional resources at many universities and colleges for things like education and public outreach, curriculum development, working with K through 12 schools. There's often professionals at your institution that you can partner with for things like evaluation. If you're trying to figure out how to evaluate the impact of your outreach activities, there may be social scientists at your institution that have expertise in this that could help you like find partners, rather than thinking, you have to learn those skills on your own. If you aren't an education specialist, maybe you want to go to the science teaching folks at your institution to think about how to better understand K through 12 curricular needs and how your work may connect with like those audiences. So I think leaning on your institutional resources can help you increase the impact, even as a single early career investigator. And I also say be authentic, because you can also tie into your role at your institution. Like sometimes if you're at a primarily undergraduate institution, right, you may be able to have impact at the undergraduate level that folks at R1 institutions really don't have the same opportunity to do, because they don't have the same kind of direct and consistent engagement with undergraduates. So you can like really leverage your role at your institution as a benefit, in a way to amplify your impact in a way that you may have unique opportunity to do. I think of the same thing for folks who are in like a outreach or extension type of role, right? Sometimes they just have these like built-in opportunities, and they might not realize how they can really sell that impact that they have, even as an early career or relatively inexperienced, like someone at the beginning of their, going into doing this kind of work, they might be able to really demonstrate impact that others may not as easily be able to do.
Great, thank you. Does any of the other panelists want to chime in on this, or we can move on to the next question? Awesome. So the next one is from Gina. So regarding the convergence focus, what is your crystal ball for detailing broader impacts for convergent opportunity? And she also mentions greater in unknowns than transdisciplinary opportunity. Anyone wants to start out with that?
I'll dive in on that one. I mean, all right. So when we're thinking about convergence research, it's kind of, I guess, you're thinking about multiple disciplines and deep engagement with stakeholder communities to solve some, really thorny, complex societal problem. And I think on the one hand, that means that, broader impacts are almost like batteries included there, because like that's, part of, it's framed in that same transdisciplinary way. But I think with convergence research, you've just got many more stakeholders, both within the intellectual team, multiple institutions, multiple disciplines. Maybe you're working with stakeholder communities that include, local agencies, NGOs, industry, like local citizens. And so like there's just a lot more moving parts. And so I think that's where like being very specific and like being able to kind of run that play of saying like, okay, what are the inputs that we're going to put into this broader impact plan? Like who, like what resources, what people, what activities are they going to be doing, with whom in the community, or which of these different stakeholders, what will be the outputs, and then what will be the outcomes, like, and being very specific about that. And it is kind of like narrowing down and saying like, we're not going to try to address every possible connection that might exist across all these diverse teams, but just leveraging like where are the opportunities, where are the relationships strongest within this group, so that you can kind of really have something that's credible, but also not as heterogeneous as like what the surface of a lot of convergence projects looks like, right? And and that's just ultimately like these same problems exist in convergence research on the intellectual side as well. I mean, so it's a hard thing to do, to kind of crystallize all of this potential into like concrete results. But I think if you do it very intentionally, and I'm focusing on the broader impacts, I think it's like a lot. It's feasible, but you have to be willing to kind of pick like it's going to be these things, and we're going to focus on these measures, and not try to like check every possible box, because that you'll lose the credibility, I think, in terms of like feasibility.
If I could build on what Kelly just said, this in an area like this, this might be also a great prompt or opportunity to have some discussion with the program officer at the funding institution in terms of, you know, what's reasonable in that space and how you narrow it down to something that will have some interest before you just plow all into writing up the proposal. So I would suggest here you would have some deliberate conversations in advance.
Awesome. Thank you for those great answers. The next question is from Bernia. She'd like to ask, Laura and Heather, is there an opportunity to get guidance from funding bodies on whether our idea aligns with their priorities before we submit a proposal? No, yeah.
Okay. I was gonna let you go first, Heather.
Sorry, awkward Zoom.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I'm so glad that Marina, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, asked this question, because the answer is absolutely yes. I know as an early career investigator, I was a bit intimidated by program officers at NSF and was very reluctant to reach out. And honestly, part of the reason I was interested in coming to NSF and being a program director was try to be more accessible. And so I would say you really should not hesitate to reach out to a program officer, whether it's about, is my research idea a fit to the scope of this program, or is this framing appropriate for the program? You know, we talked about framing before, you know, are these broader impact activities appropriate? Or there's a lot of resources that we can share with you. And that's our job. And a lot of people do reach out with questions. So if you email a program officer with a one-page summary or basic question, rest assured, like, you are in good company with a large group of other people who are asking those same questions. And whatever questions you have, they've been asked before, and we are ready to answer them. So I just want to encourage anyone in the audience who has a question, especially for the National Science Foundation, don't hesitate to reach out to a program officer. You know, that's our job. And so we're here to help you and help you figure out how your work aligns with our priorities.
And I would also say, I mean, Laura's a super responsive, open, easily approachable person. If you find that you're not coming up against that in other agencies or other funding proposals, I mean, look at someone in that agency. For example, I'll just throw myself under the bus here, but like an EPA, if for some reason, you know, you can't find that person, you could always reach out to someone that's familiar and say, could you look at this? Or do you know of someone who is working in this realm that I could talk to? And just, but for sure, always reach out and just keep looking for that person if you can't find them, if it's not a program officer at NSF, but if it's another agency.
Great, thank you both for that awesome response. Our next question, what strategies and skills should a third or fourth, so like mid to late career PhD student develop to write a competitive and fundable research grant proposal? I don't know if maybe Kelly, you want to start out with this? Do you have any ideas?
I think it's hard. I mean, it's hard to give like obviously very narrow and specific advice to a question like that. But I think one piece of advice I often give my students when they're embarking on any kind of writing project that's related to like their core intellectual strength is to just kind of focus, try to have empathy and think about your audience and what they're trying to achieve with the document that you're providing them. And I think that this just gets to an issue of kind of, you're often competing with other really great ideas. And so your challenge is to communicate your ideas in a way that gets at least someone on the panel or some reviewer or a program manager really enthusiastic and excited about it. And that doesn't mean that you just need to frame it as like a compelling narrative and to kind of provide the context and the information to allow someone to get enthusiastic about what you're doing. We see lots and lots of proposals. We can only fund a few of them. And so the ones that get funded, yeah, sure, sometimes it's just like a genius idea that just dropped in from another planet. But most of the time, it's stuff that if you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, I could do that. I thought I proposed to do something like that. And it's the way that like try to just you're not in the room. You can't be there. And so your words are all you have. And you have a reader, and you need to think about them, not just trying to like look smart or like get a bunch of detail or cram like a million extra little things into your method section, but just try to, kind of write in a way that obviously like explains what you want to do, why it's important, why it's innovative, why, you're a good person to do it, but also kind of like allows someone else to really feel the enthusiasm for the work that you have, obviously in a professional way. But I just think that people miss that a lot, and they come in trying to win on kind of feats of strength. And I think there's a lot of art to doing a good proposal. And you can practice that early on and get better at it. Unfortunately, you won't find it too much if you ask your colleagues for it. So it's like, going to the literature to learn how to write a good article. 9 times out of 10, you're going to find a pretty bad paper. So, really look at people who are successful and ask them how they do it. And you'll often find that they think a lot about how they write and how they communicate.
I just want to pick up on something that Kelly said there that I thought was really important, but I maybe I'll frame it slightly differently. And this is something I advise people all the time. To whatever extent you can sort of get empathy for the reviewer. Often we're writing, like you mentioned, Kelly, like you want to show like your chops, like you want to put those details in, you want it to be, you kind of want to show how much you know. And I completely relate to that feeling. But once you're a reviewer, and I always talk about, well, before a panel, picture the panelist in their hotel room. It's 10 p.m. at night. They've got 2 more proposals to read, and they pick up yours. And it's packed with text, and it has no figures and no tables, and it's full of jargon, and they're exhausted, and you can imagine you sort of start off on the wrong foot, and it has nothing to do with the quality of your ideas or how much you know. And so some of it is like, maybe I would say, as someone, if you're interested in writing proposals, if you have any opportunity to review them, I found that experience just gave me such empathy with the reviewer and, trying to sort of help them out, be so explicit, what are the review criteria? Let me go ahead and explicitly state how I'm addressing these review criteria and things like that, which seems so formulaic, but you really just want to make the job of the reviewer very easy, get on that first page, really, what is the key here, right? Make them want to get past the first page. And so as a PhD student, you might have fewer opportunities, like, as an early career postdoc or faculty member, you could reach out to a program officer to do ad hoc reviews or serve on a panel. But as a PhD student, I mean, if you have a group of students and you can do peer reviewing for one another, sometimes you can ask a faculty member if they get a paper to review, could you kind of take a stab at doing a review? Any kind of opportunity you have to sort of practice being the reviewer, I think can really, really help you be a better writer. And so that's something I would really encourage. Although I understand as a student, sometimes you have to kind of manufacture those opportunities.
Those are great responses. Heather and Billy, do you want to chime in? Anything? Okay, this is our last question we'll end on.
Nothing to add here except that for broader impact statements as well as your science career in general, I would highly encourage any early career student scientists to consider taking a science communication course, because that can help how you write, it can help how you get your ideas across, and it's a great investment of your time. And you can look to professional societies or maybe other places, even at your university. If you have an opportunity to do that, I would highly encourage it.
Great. Thank you so much for that advice, everyone. So it is 9:59. I don't think we'll be able to get to another question, but I really want to sincerely thank each of the panelists for your time today and your really thoughtful answers. I'll pass it over to Julia with some to give the closing remarks.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Kelly and Caitlin for moderating, and Mazvita for our opening remarks. And thank you so much to our panelists today and for this conversation. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your expertise. And with that, we can close things out. Have a great rest of your afternoon or morning, wherever you find yourself. And thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.